In this lesson, we'll begin a mini project where we create a type-based design for our client. Okay, so if you want to go ahead and check your Photoshop Files folder inside your project files, look for this Lesson 8 Begin file. This is what I'm going to be working in here. So let's just go ahead and say that we've been approached by a friend of ours who is a photographer, and he needs some kind of a graphic that can be used for the opening of his photography show titled In Focus. So with that said, I've gone ahead and typed up another document here. You want to check your referenced files folder, you'll find this file. So I've gone ahead and stated the problem, established some objectives, as well as kind of specced out some things that we could research for this project. So let's just say that our client needs a graphic that doesn't interfere with his work, but successfully conveys the idea that life comes into focus through the lens of his camera, which totally feasible concept for a photographer. So let's go ahead and just get started here. Now, I went ahead and did a little bit of brainstorming and did a few really rough sketches here, just some different ideas. Started to make sort of a word list. And again, this is very, very quick, but I think we have some solid direction to go with here because, well, quite simply, the word focus is a very visual word. What are some things that you think of when you hear the word focus? I tell you, I think of quite a few different things. So with that said, let's go ahead and just kind of get some type on our screen to play with here. So I'm going to go ahead and start with just a blank canvas here, and I'm going to grab Photoshop's type tool. It's right over here, and I'm just simply going to click and I'm going to drag out a text box. So let's just go ahead and click and drag. And let's go ahead and use this text box for the word in. So I want to go ahead and just type in IN, and I'm going to go ahead and use Adobe Garamond here. Again, that's the same typeface we looked at in the previous lesson, but I'm going to use the italic version of this typeface. So now obviously this text box is much too large for just the word in, so we could shrink this down a little bit if we really wanted to. Let's grab our move tool and kind of center that up, and we'll go ahead and quickly grab our type tool again here, and I want to just drag out another text frame. So basically, if you look over in my layers panel, we've added a second type layer here, and I'm going to go ahead and in this one I'm going to type focus. Now I'm not going to use Adobe Garamond for both of these two words because I want to be able to create some hierarchy here as well as some contrast. So obviously the word focus is the more important of the two words, so we need to draw attention to it in some form or fashion. Now we could do that in a lot of different ways. We could do that in size. We could do that by using a more dominant typeface. So let's go ahead and use one here. Now at this point I'm going to apologize because the typeface I'm going to use is not a free typeface, and I'm not going to be allowed to include this with the project files, but again, it's a very, very simple, clean sans serif typeface. So it's called Kievit, and we'll just go ahead and plug that in there. And as you can see, I've switched to the black version of this typeface. If you don't have this typeface, don't worry about it. Pick out another sans serif typeface that is fairly heavy, like the one I'm using here. So let's go ahead and open up our character panel now at this point. So I'll just jump up to Window, and we'll choose Character right there. All right, great. So now one thing we can do here is also change it from your typical sentence case where the first letter is capital. I'm going to double click and select the whole word, and I'm going to select this button right here to change the entire word to its uppercase version here. So now obviously I think the contrast in size here between the two needs to be improved. So I'm going to come in and let me just select all this type again here. And I'm going to go ahead and increase the size of this. And we'll go ahead and make this pretty large. Let's just go ahead and grab this setting right here. And as you can see, we're at 100 point right now. Let's go up to 200 point and see what that looks like. That's looking pretty good, quite a bit larger now. I may come in here and stretch my text frame out just a little bit larger, maybe snap it to the edges of my canvas here, just using these transform controls on the edges of the frame. And let's go ahead and use this setting right here. Now, looking at this here, it feels very, very heavy in its current state because those letters are fairly close together. Now, we can actually make it feel a little bit lighter and let those letters breathe a little bit by spacing them out some here. And we can do that using the tracking here in the character panel. It's the setting right about here. And I'm going to go ahead and bump that up to maybe about 100, like so. And let's go ahead and increase the size even a bit more. Let's go maybe up to 225, maybe 250. Just getting to where it's nice and large on our canvas here. Okay, great. That's pretty large. Now, if we come over here into our layers panel, we can shift select both of those two layers and we can move them around at the same time. Now, in doing this, I'm going to kind of center them up here, but it looks like our letter N is not perfectly centered on the canvas. So we can fix that by using these align buttons up here. I'm going to go ahead and click this one right here, and you can see it shifts both of those two objects to the center of the canvas. So that's looking pretty good. Now we've got a nice contrast between the two typefaces. We've created some nice hierarchy here. Now it's time to kind of focus on the concept of life coming into focus through the lens of this artist's camera. So how could we convey that with this word focus? Well, we could come in and we could blur out a portion of this word. Let me go ahead and show you a quick and easy way to do that. We'll just want to come over and right click on the layer here, and let's go ahead and convert that to a smart object. Now, we used a smart object briefly in a previous lesson, but what I'm going to do now that we have that converted into a smart object, I'm going to come in and apply a filter to that. So we'll come up here under the filter drop down, look for blur, and I'm going to choose this Gaussian blur right here. Now obviously that's blurring the entire word out, and if life is coming into focus, it's the way I visualize that is it's going from blurry to in focus. So I'm going to go ahead and set this to about 15 pixels and hit OK, but I don't want the entire word focus to be blurry. That seems like the exact opposite of coming into focus. So we need at least maybe this right half to maybe gradually be coming into focus. Let's go ahead and use what actually comes with that filter when it's applied to a smart object here. If we look over in the layers panel, you'll find this little white square right here. This is referred to as a mask, and we can use this mask to mask out this Gaussian blur effect here. So in order to do this, we need to go ahead and click on the mask here. Let's come in and select our gradient tool right here. And you want to make sure you have this black to white gradient selected right there. Now, if we're going to create a black to white gradient, let me just go ahead and make sure my filter, or rather my mask, is selected. I'm just going to click on the left-hand portion of this F, and I'm going to hold Shift so I'm dragging a straight line. We'll drag that all the way over to the right-hand edge of the S. And you can see what happened here. We created our black to white gradient, but that's kind of the exact opposite effect that we actually want. We actually want to go from blurry to in focus, not from in focus to blurry. So let me undo that with a Control Z here, and instead of dragging that direction, let's go ahead and drag from right to left here, sort of like that. Now that seems a lot clearer. It seems more like the word focus is gradually coming into focus. Now we could play with that gradient a little bit here if we wanted to maybe extend that blur a little further into that letter C. Maybe sort of like that. Just constantly redragging that gradient here. But overall, I think that's a really nice, effective way to communicate the concept for our artist's show with just type. Now, the only problem with using just this type that we've created right here is it really doesn't say anything about photography. That's the only problem. It just states that something is coming into focus. One way that we could actually maybe create more of a photography focus on this mark we're creating is to use an image to help us out. So let's come over here, and if you look in your referenced files folder, you'll find this gallery.jpg. This is another stock image, and I'm simply going to grab my move tool here. That's the keyboard shortcut V, and let's just simply just click on the canvas here, and I'm going to drag it over to the tab here for our file entitled Lesson 8 Begin. So we'll just drag it over and drop it right on the canvas there. Now obviously that dropped it in between our two type layers here. Let's go ahead and drag that down above the sketches layer right there. And we'll go ahead and click on the eyeballs next to those two type layers just to hide them for a moment so we can kind of grab this and center it up here. That looks about right. So now we could come in at this point and maybe use our type and integrate it into this picture frame. Now, in doing this, we may think about rethinking the idea of our blur to further integrate it into the image. Maybe as this type is coming into this picture frame where the photographs would be mounted in the gallery, maybe this type comes into focus as it passes into the inside of the frame here. So let's come over here and maybe select our mask again, and what we'll want to do is kind of start over with this mask. So if we come up here to edit and choose fill, we're going to want to fill it with our background color because our background color is currently white. Whichever one white is set to, you'll want to fill it with that. So you'll see here by doing that it changes the entire or rather the word focus now receives the entirety of that blur. So now in order to kind of limit the area, I'm going to zoom in a little bit using a Control spacebar or Control Alt spacebar to zoom out. But we want to basically create a black area in our mask to hide this effect that comes right here to the edge of the frame. So if we want to limit the area that we're painting into or applying paint to, we could use the marquee selection tool. It's right here. Actually, we'll use the rectangular variant of that. And we'll just go ahead and zoom in one more time. And what I'm going to do is I'm simply going to click and drag a marquee selection right up to the edge of that frame, just like so. Now, as you're drawing this, if you didn't quite get it positioned right, you can hold the space bar and you can reposition that. You can see how I'm floating that selection around. So that's just one little handy keyboard shortcut to remember. And if you release the space bar before you release your mouse button, you can continue drawing that. So I'm going to go ahead and release it right about there. And let's go ahead and make sure we have our mask selected. And let's do an edit fill. And this time let's fill with the foreground color. There we go. So we have now hidden the blur inside the picture frame. Now we'll want to go ahead and deselect, so we'll go select and choose this deselect option here. Control D is the keyboard shortcut for that. So you can see that this is already starting to look pretty neat because the type looks like it's passing into the frame and becoming in focus. Now, one last thing that would help this illusion is if we couldn't see the type, I think, right here where the frame is. So we can actually employ another mask to help us out with that, but instead of masking the smart filter that we've applied, we're going to actually mask the type layer, or this smart object itself. So let's click this button right down here. This is the layer mask button, and it'll add this little white thumbnail to the smart object layer. And we'll just go ahead and click to zoom in. And again, using our rectangular marquee tool, let's go ahead and draw in a selection here on top of that frame. Right about there looks good. Now, I'll go ahead and edit, fill, and foreground color again. Actually, scratch that. Let's go ahead and, actually, yes, let's go ahead and do foreground. There we go. And you can see here how we've hidden the letter form where the frame is itself. So we'll just do that one more time right over here. Get our selection just right. And edit, fill, foreground color. And Control D to deselect, and there we go. We've actually created a really nice effect here where it appears that the word focus is passing into the picture frame itself and actually is becoming more in focus than obviously outside the frame. So this is just a really simple example that we've walked through here in creating a type-based design that really conveys the concept of the piece itself. So hopefully you've enjoyed this little mini project. If you have another idea for a solution to this design problem, by all means, feel free to explore that one as well.